How much would you pay for a giant steel box? Well, if you're Jacinta Allen and the Victorian Labor government, you'd pay $325,000 per box for 40 boxes for a total of $13 million. And what do you get for your money? Well, you get these boxes. They're like those recycled clothes boxes when you're donating clothes for people who are homeless or to the Salvation Army. For your money, you get a box that looks decidedly mundane, but it is painted in bright blue and it has stickers on it, one of which indicates that there's surveillance surrounding this box. These boxes, by the way, are so that people can deposit machetes into them in the light of Victoria's ban on machetes. Now, I will just note one issue here, that if you've got criminals depositing weapons into a box, and you've got a picture on there saying that the box is under surveillance, how many criminals do you think are actually going to show up and deposit their machete into the box when they know they're being surveilled? I think they haven't thought very much about the nature of their boxes. Nevertheless, there are a whole host of questions about this, including whether the money was well spent and the efficacy of the ban entirely. Now, I've talked a little bit in the past about whether or not it's a good idea to ban machetes, and spoiler alert, it really isn't that effective. After all, if you go into any household kitchen, you can find any assortment of knives, and machetes are available in many other states. So you've got this situation where Victoria bans machetes, but it is very easy to just drive across the border with a machete from, say, New South Wales or South Australia, and you don't even need to go that far. You can just go to Kmart or to David Jones or even to Coles and get a knife. The knife won't be quite as effective as a machete, but it will probably do the job for the most part. Banning machetes doesn't seem to actually do very much to deter determined criminals, but it could potentially stop law-abiding citizens who might want a machete for protection or who might want a machete for household maintenance if they're living on a farm or the like. This ban seems like it probably won't work. It's quite unlike firearms, which are nationally restricted, so you've got somewhat uniform types of restrictions across states. They are generally imported into Australia, and there's no innocuous substitute that's found in every household kitchen. But the efficacy of the ban aside, let's focus on these steel bins, because it is absurd, and the sheer cost of them is raising some questions. So let's have a look at how these figures stack up. Well, if we just Google for giant metal bins, we can see that Alibaba sells several of these. They sell large clothing donation bins. Now, these typically are several $100s, sometimes a little bit over $1,000. Now, clearly there's shipping and the like that you need to factor in. However, they are clearly not $325,000. Now, I might dispute about the quality of some of those bins. However, they certainly would probably do the job. After all, when people are going and raiding these machete bins, well, it appears there's surveillance, so the people need to be aware that they might be surveilled. But also, say you're looking at a clothing bin and someone is trying to steal something from that clothing bin. They really need to reach in very awkwardly. It's not the easiest thing to do necessarily, so you would think they would probably do the job. But even if you think that the bin is not secure enough, you could probably get a tradie to adjust the angle of the door opening, or you could get a tradie to reinforce the bin with some additional metal sheets. In essence, you could add onto that bin, which is already relatively inexpensive, to make it even more secure. Furthermore, you get a tradie to add some brackets so you can secure it to the ground. Now, of course, if someone's going to steal this bin, that probably won't stop it. But let's face it, they'd be able to steal the $325,000 bin anyway. And all up, this excursion would cost, well, at most $10,000. Now, that's the Alibaba route. What if you want a fully custom-made metal bin because you don't trust Alibaba or you wanted to get done earlier? Well, you have a few options, but let's go with a completely custom metal bin. Well, the materials would not be that expensive. You could get the metal cladding from Bunnings, for example, Colorbond roofing, and you can just have a couple of layers of that. Or you get slightly thicker sheet metal, and then you could hire someone to fabricate that metal bin. All up, surely your costs would not be much more than $10,000. I think it could possibly be done for even less than that, but probably not more than that. So I dare say, you could probably almost make all 40 bins for $325,000 in total. Not $325,000 per bin, but in total. Now, I'm sure that some tradies or some welders or some metal workers in the comments could let me know whether that figure is realistic, but I'm sure that they could highlight that $12 million is probably a lot for these metal bins. Or instead of going down that route, you could just buy a shipping container and then create a deposit hole in the front of the shipping container. Now, the shipping container would be very large, you need to put it somewhere where there's land, but think about many of the council parking spots, well, you've got somewhere to put that bin. Or indeed, let's ask ourselves what you could get for $325,000 instead of a metal bin. Well, I think you could build an entire granny flat or a structure. Indeed, I've had these things priced in the past, and it's less than $325,000. So you could build not just a metal box, but a fully habitable space with electricity, plumbing, and shelter and roofs, and it can be done up as something that actually been lived in for $325,000. So maybe Victoria should have built 40 granny flats, which you could then potentially sell later. Or maybe they could have reached an agreement with enterprising commercial landowners or residential landowners, whereby the thing could be built on that land and there be some form of agreement about the use of that land in return for the structure being at least partially, potentially entirely subsidized on the land. The idea being that you could spend that money significantly more wisely than on this metal clothes recycling bin. The fact that they spent this much money on those bins is astounding, given all of the other things they could spend the money on. So the question is, where does this money go and why is it so expensive? Well, we don't really have clear answers from Victoria here, so we are left to speculate a bit. But it appears it's all bureaucracy, consultants, and myriad layers of red tape, etc. that need to all be gone through. In essence, it's all overhead. There's no plausible way that these bins themselves cost $325,000 each. It all has to be the layers of labor and bureaucracy that are added on top of these that are complete nonsense. It makes no sense for there to be this much bureaucracy that it costs so much money to get these things installed. An insane inefficiency is what you're going to get because the bureaucrats and politicians are spending other people's money. I believe it was Topher Field who dug into this and remarked that these egregious problems arise almost by design of how the bureaucracy exists. Bureaucrats gain by increasing their budget and by managing more people, because it makes them look more important. So in order to do that, they need to spend more money this year so they can justify a higher budget next year. It's a perverse incentive. It encourages people to spend more money, not to be frugal. And when they're spending more money on projects like this, well, surely if we've got $12 million as your budget or $13 million as your budget, well, you need more staff for next year as well to manage that amount of money. So increase your budget, you increase your staff, and it perpetuates, because these staff all need something to do, so they find a way to create their own little fiefdom with people underneath them, and so on and so on. It's a pyramid scheme that bakes in inefficiency and cost, and is a perverse incentive to be less efficient and to spend more money. And it's problematic because it's not the bureaucrats or the politicians' money, it's our money. The bureaucrats and the politicians only bear a very small portion of the cost via their taxes, but they get the totality of the benefit via their salary and their career uplift. They're incentivized to spend more and be more inefficient. It's a farcical situation. So we end up with this absurd problem where we're spending $325,000 for a metal box. It's profoundly stupid. But Victorians keep voting for these clowns. Now, to be clear, there is a political trash fire in Victoria. The Liberals are not exactly great at the moment. Now, clearly under Brad Batten they are less bad than they were, but they still haven't really gotten their act together. But, in my opinion, this isn't really a contest between a giant douche and a turd sandwich, to use the analogy from South Park. Rather, it's a contest between a steaming pile of cancerous crap on the one hand, being Jacinta Allen's Labour Party and Dan Andrews' Labour Party, and a classroom of toddlers competing over who can throw the noisiest tantrum on the other hand, being the Liberal Party, none of whom seem to be able to get the act together to actually cooperate. And the school teacher in this analogy, being Brad Batten, is trying in vain to get those toddlers to concentrate and not be going at each other's throats. Now, I'm just happy I don't live in Victoria, because it's a dumpster fire. It's effectively become a one-party state where Labour has become so entrenched, in large part because they make people more and more reliant on government, so people don't vote against the government because they're reliant on it, and you just get a self-perpetuating situation where you're spending $325,000 for a metal clothes recycling bin. That's where Victoria is at the moment. It's a trash fire, and everyone else can see that it's a trash fire, and Victoria is a cautionary tale telling all of the other states what they need to avoid doing. But you can let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Do you think the $325,000 is justifiable, or do you think it's probably a bit of a waste of money? Let me know what you think.